Alright, so here's a little bit more about this. Okay, so let me tell you what's been happening around here. Basically, you have people that are in sex, and they've been basically targeting drug. So essentially, like, well, when I was in jail in 2015 for a DUI, I was in jail with one of the drug leaders, and that while he was in jail, a group at Kennewick, Amazon, an integrated group of people that butt fuck each other and pedophile blackmail and shit like that, essentially took over his drug world. He was sitting at the top, not really doing anything, but he was their leader in ways. And that they were able to take over his drug silk, basically. And that essentially he had like it's not a club system, but it basically is. Basically. And that they have an emulated system, basically. And so they were able to acquire it by fuck clubbing out people, by torturing them and blackmailing them. So when that happens, these people here in Tri-Cities, there's an integrated cross-network, cross-United States. Essentially, they're like Nazi bikers, basically. That all the other Nazi bikers would have noticed one of their drug network cells, basically, being filled with people that are pedophiling and butt-fucking. See, those people, they might have a couple of bad blackmails, but after that, after they get fuck switched for it, basically, then they do harems and stuff like that. And so everybody in there would have noticed these people butt fucking each other and pedophiling in front of everyone. So what happens when people do that is that the other drug cells, I mean, this is the same in the Mexicans world also. Then those people essentially just become slave cells that basically get tortured and blackmailed by the other groups into running the drug cell. And then they collect all the money. So that was in 2015, that one, and that was like, whatever these bikers are in Kennewick. It's essentially that network or something. And so then I noticed that they busted the Colombian and Mexican cartel guy around here who has a theoretical similar system. And then they start pedophiling and butt fucking it. And those Mexican dudes, they fuck 2 chicks blatantly. And so then all the other drug cells, basically, they collect those. And then that gives them access to the speakers. And then they have to run the drug cell. And so that is where these people like aren't really smart enough to understand Basically, they had a police convention here. And that those people were part of the group that outfits the speakers and shit. And that they convinced people before they showed up to that police convention that the convention itself had doctors that were outfitting that stuff and blackmailing people as pedophiles and rapists. And so, one of the things about Moby's little world is once he gets the blackmails and the speaker shoved in the ears or whatever, then they pretty much instantly start fucking torturing and blackmailing you and laughing in your face. Right? They did that to a lot of police officers that showed up to that convention. In ways, the convention itself was basically meant to outfit people with that stuff, basically. And so, that is where a lot of the things that those people go through when they take over these drug systems is basically pushed by the anger of those police officers. Because what the rest of the world does essentially blackmails people in the same way, but they don't blatantly psycho Moby right afterward. And so that's where in other places years go by before they do that blatant mockery of tricking them into being a slave, essentially. And see, Moby likes to do that instantly. And yeah, he probably learned that from his little horse trackies. Because that's essentially what that guy would do. He would blatant right after the blackmail. He would like slave control people right away. He would be a psycho with them and shit. And so that's kind of what's different about Tri-Cities is that this type of stuff is somewhat typical all over the South. It's typical in Spokane, it's typical and it exists in most of the cities of the main route it exists on. Even Portland and shit. And so, but then those places aren't as see, these pedophiles like to be in the dark web. They like to be just blatant at everyone in Tri-Cities. And you see, I'm from Tri-Cities, and I love to be blatant about them. It's called a switchy bitch. And that since they're psychotic, Napoleon complex people, they really are, in a real textbook psychology way. They don't they do what's called pedo man or something. They don't like being switchy bitched. And so, basically, they'll refuse to be subverting their blatant psychoiness kind of shit. They'll refuse. It goes against their whole pedo freedom fucking world of psychoness or something. Okay? But like I say, this stuff in Tri-Cities kind of fueled other people in these other cities I went to be doing what they do here, where in the past that stuff was today pretty subversive. People wouldn't be so blatant and stuff. And that since the psychological profiles basically idiots that don't comprehend anything, is that once they really started to like see they enjoy this blatant shit so much that is like what that's kind of what like the difference is. It's like in the 80s, that guy, he would be in like an inner circle of small group of people and would be blatant. But these people like to broadcast over whole 1,000,000,000 people, okay? They like to broadcast their blatant like control and shit like that. See that guy won't want them doing that. I know that. More than likely they would have been keeping that stuff from that guy. Because essentially they just don't seem to comprehend that massive satanic pedophile brothel child trafficking route is literally one of the most high risk traffickings that you can do in the whole fucking world. Okay? It's like, and that essentially the routing system is a routing system that's existed for a long time. And in the past, the older generation that was running that did things like when I talk about these Mormon witches and then they're all like super subversive experts at like code and shit like that, okay? And that they would be very risk, they would minimize risk. They would shut down if it got too risky or something. They would. These fucking stupid asses nowadays. They go and they take over other systems and then they become slaves. Right? And then they're expected to make all that money, and so then they start broadcasting themselves being a tech psycho and shit. Right? And so that's where the faction system was in lots of ways created where these people were never supposed to be taking over these drug cells and shit. And this is what brings me back to the anger from the police officers. They have been pushing them to basically be doing with it. Okay, so the cops normally in a normal city, they get horrible blackmails. And then they get the speakers. And then they essentially take over drug cells, kind of. And then they become slaves. But see, here in Tri-Cities, those guys were so fucking blatant that, like, they, oh yeah, what hell, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, look, I have fucking slave. They wouldn't do shit for those people. And that's kind of like where their humorous laughter after they blackmail somebody is like, it's just to be a psycho and laugh in their face how they trick them into blackmailing and shit. Okay? And so that is where normally it's the cops that are like, that like take over the cells. And then they have to be slaves. Basically. And so the whole idea is that they wouldn't be able to take those over without having this theoretical system. And this theoretical system requires pedophilia blackmails. And so that's like where when the cops, they essentially have to do the same thing with that. The only difference here is that when you go to other cities, what you'll find is that the cops basically have to run the child or the drug the drug cell. And so this is like, this is what I found, this is what I found is that other cities, the cops were doing that, basically. And then here I noticed that all the people that slaved everyone had to be the slaves, had to be the ones going in and doing that stuff. And so that is kind of where the dynamic here is a little different. The psychoness is different. The fucking extremeness is different. These people are extreme sociopaths. The cops, they kind of are too, but the ones here literally are so psycho-y from what that hypnotist group tricked them into. But they were able to avoid having to run the drug cell. But essentially, they're stuck in child trafficking. The worst one. Tri-Cities is the worst child trafficking cell. It is. And so it's not. That's why the cops are all psycho right here. Because unless you're like a mopey, basically, see, it's like an internal family kind of. See, that guy went and spooged so many babies, basically. That those people, they don't have to, like, be fuck switched and shit. Basically. And that everybody else in this one, because it's the most psycho-iest one, those people have to subject themselves to a progressive satanic sex slaving that causes their mind to become psychopathic. These little mopies, they get punishments for fucking up, but they don't have to, like these cops. Some of them, like each month, literally have to have a team of satanic sex slavers, the mopies, the furry farms. They have to leave their door open and get raped, basically. And then it starts to twist their mind after years of it. And so that is where the dynamics of this stuff is, in the end, the cops that take over the drug cells, they run a huge risk. They really do. But they don't have to be fuck switched. It doesn't build their psychosis problem. But they'll still get the sound torture shit. They'll still get blackmailed. They'll still get posted blatantly trafficking the drugs. And so, since this stuff was like, they essentially, the reason, and then here's the other thing, the Mobies were the ones going around collecting these dark web contracts. That includes the terror plot. Let's see, then they run control over the police officers. And they target, they target everybody. Doesn't matter who you are. They target everybody. So it's like Hanford's a main target for different theoretical reasons, but that is basically where this place, and this is why I was bringing this stuff up years ago, because you can't, this is what I know, you can't just let this stuff be covered up, because it doesn't change anything. It just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And that the whole idea is that I attempted to find the city that had the most problems. You see, these bikers, I was able to interface with them because they knew what would happen. And that Bozeman was like considered a potential like progressed system like here in Tri-Cities, but in Vegas was all those cities I went to. But then what I basically was ascertaining was where the main progressed blackmailing control city was. I pretty much knew that it was Tri-Cities, but I wanted to see if there was a different one, because basically if you find the main city that has the most inoculation, then that is phase one of disruption of the whole thing. You gotta find the top city first, the top inoculation city. You see, these people in Vegas, they know that if you come to Tri-Cities, the inoculation is at its peak. Even more than Vegas. Because there's legal prostitutes all over that narc people off everywhere. Right? So what ends up happening is that essentially Colombia was pretty much similar. But see, the way that it works is the top city collects. So anybody that would have been like coming to Columbia, South Carolina, that stuff, essentially the primary holding of those images exists here. Every other Vegas, when people pedo bang and shit, all those places, that stuff exists here. And so that is kind of where these people were doing the blackmailing into the dark webs. But they weren't doing it. See, they thought it would stay internal in their city or something. It doesn't. This is why I was trying to ascertain, because here, whatever city this is the exact place where all of that stuff essentially is the hard encoded. See, you could destroy the servers that have that stuff here and shit, but the moment that you create another server, this city AI for their child trafficking shit rebuilds it. And so you can get rid of servers all you want, but essentially the moment that some pedophile group makes another server is the moment that this AI rebuilds all the blackmails that everybody was trying to destroy. And it's because the Melby system here in Tri-Cities virtualizes everything and pushes a recreation of it when you start up a server again. So, see, essentially you gotta find that guy's bastards, okay, and that the AI is attached to their speakers, and that once you destroy their speaker, then it destroys a section. See, each one has a speaker AI, and that is essentially virtualized, and that once you destroy the speaker, then it destroys the virtualization. And so all the little mobies here in Tri-Cities, There's essentially 13 of them. And that they build a pedo seal or whatever they do. And that essentially builds the AI, and then this stuff starts to push out when these child traffickers rebuild a server again. And so that is where if the conservative realm is looking to erase all of their mistakes in their life, try cities where it all started. Isn't that ironic? And in the end, the little boy that was the man over all of you, that told you all what to fucking do, is sitting right here, telling you all what to do. And if you would have listened to me in the 1980s about how to take a Polaroid video of a legal prairie, none of you would be in this position right now. And if you would have just listened to me as a child, then you wouldn't be in this position. And if you listen to me now as a man, then you won't be in this situation. These people, these 13 people in this city, they control a very powerful system that they get lots of money from terrorists, Chinese, Russians, and Putin and shit, to be accessing this. So, with that stuff, if you guys are looking to clean up that stuff, the Mopies, they're the liability. And that Mopey doesn't really understand because number 14 balances. And that is the anti-psycho. That's my profile, essentially. And see, these people built this stuff around a copy of my profile. And that they have the interface access, and I don't. And that is where my profile is what they're using. So, I got one to be blatant. The power of weird drones and stuff. Oh yeah, the power of weird face drone stuff. That's where Mopey is a psycho pedophile. So that's where Mopey, he likes to do psycho pedophile, which is this one. And that essentially anything that's psychotically pedophile will be virtualized out of his speaker. And that if you learn how to disable the speaker in a physical way, then the virtualization goes away. This is where, in the past, they were doing this kind of stuff. And then the ghouls would magically make that device not work anymore. See, they would put a gun in one ear and then would blast through their head, and then it would disable the speaker, and then it would make the virtualization disappear. And so, a lot of my silence in the past was because, well, I just didn't really care. Basically, what you people probably saw maybe in Washington, D.C. was probably Tri-Cities. The ex-Special Force guys, they call this place Satan's Lair. And then anybody that like ever saw them kind of run in and shoot somebody in the head? I would have been here in Tri-Cities, and it would have like made a whole blackmail system like disappear. That's their magic. But I mean, essentially, if the government, they are doing terrorist contracts, so there's a Gitmo ability, and that then essentially, probably need to go to a black site, and then you could probably surgically remove those, and then just step on them and break them. The cochlear implant speaker with AI Connect. Right. Or, I mean, this is like where this problem is like, so many people were like falling for this S&M blackmailing shit. And we're talking millions and millions and millions of the Western world. That essentially is sick and tired of the stupid fucking servers rebuilding that shit, okay? They're sick of it. That is where what people don't understand is that they built a whole infrastructure of reasons to not believe me around here. Okay. I researched all of this stuff, and that it was meant to make the whole stupid world be erased. My research. What I know people will do because of that stuff, people will victimize more children. They'll victimize more women and shit. They'll cause guys to go psycho from cucking their wives and shit. They will. And I mean, this is what people will do. After they get the blackmails, they'll start victimizing people all over again. And it will only get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And that this is where the wizard ghouls, everybody was targeting them to be going to prison. And that this is why I started my research. Because once they took away the ghouls' wizard powers, that's essentially where they knew what would happen. See, Tri-Cities in ways, the Polaroid VHS stuff, that stuff was like a time where they weren't allowed to be killing them and shit, and they just blackmailed more and more people and more people and more. This happened in the 80s and in other cities. And then it got so bad that everybody started turning into a psycho and shit, and justifying victimizations of children based on amnesia, fuck switches and shit, okay? This is where essentially my trailer park was basically the blackmailing mill, okay? And then from that blackmail came people who essentially had to hand Polaroids to those people that held that stuff on them. And so then they would use people's children and their own children and stuff to be getting a blackmail real fast, to be handing to them all the time. VHSs and shit. And then it started to victimize more and more children all over Tri-Cities in the 1980s. And then somebody decided to let the wizard and his ghouls be fixing the problems. And then that's where some people weren't able to be, because they held blackmail on some very rich and powerful people. those people still exist, but they were able to make most of the psychoness end by basically getting rid of all of the people blackmailing everyone. And that is what essentially put things in like a minimum way. Like I say, the child trafficking stuff, the blackmailing stuff, it still existed, but it was minimized to a very small group of people. And now that group has expanded to all their bastards, basically. And they have just been going crazy about their ability